Hi, it's Dustin Lanier. Thanks for listening. Please find me on LinkedIn for original public sector operations content every week. And please reach out to me if I and my team of procurement professionals at Civic Initiatives can help you be a public procurement change agent. Pam, thanks for making a little bit of time. You're the Executive Director of NASCA, one of my favorite organizations. Why don't you introduce yourself and NASCA, and then we can talk about a report that you guys have coming out this week.
Well, thanks, Dustin. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you about this. NASCA is the National Association for State Chief Administrators. Relatively a small group that not everyone knows. These are the governor-appointed cabinet-level officials in each of the states who really run the business of government. They oversee procurement, IT, many of them oversee budgets, HR, fleet, general services, just a myriad of areas of responsibility across the state. So we're their national association, and we're excited to chat a little bit today about this report that's coming out next week.
Great. We actually did some content on work from anywhere, dealing with how people at an administration level are trying to think about bringing people back to work and how do you create a hybrid environment. And I've been arguing for, if we have a work from anywhere mentality that says that we still have the expectation of work being done, there may be some in person blended with externals, that it's going to be a powerful model to consider. I did some content on that a couple weeks back, and then you guys have a report coming out here in a few days. So what kind of research have you guys been doing related to this, and how we think about the work and the location for our employees?
I mean, you're exactly right. Overnight, all the states had to really send all their employees home. And now that we're coming out of this global health pandemic, our states now are saying, really, what does our workforce look like? What does the workplace look like? So we were able to partner with JLL, which is a consulting company that works primarily around real estate, to do a series of interviews with state chief administrators. And we're about ready to release this report next week on how states are future fitting their real estate portfolios. So I'm sure you can imagine that that's a big question now for most of the states. What they found is that state employees have been extremely productive, and it's been a good situation. And many of the state employees are saying, I'm enjoying working from home. This is a good situation for me. I've proven that I can be effective and efficient and still meet the needs of our citizens. So overall, I think if the states saw that there were productivity levels that increased across the board. And so now states are really looking at, do we keep some of this remote work? Do we set up some type of a hybrid workplace that includes a mixture of some time in office and then some time working from home or working from any place, as you were mentioned. So we know that productivity is higher. We know that the work-life balance is enhanced when employees have choice. We also know that as an employer of choice, our states are seeing that they can attract more new workers with this remote or hybrid opportunity. Diversity and inclusion is something that can be embedded into a hybrid workplace. And it really just lowers the real estate costs. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more today as well.
So what are some of the key drivers that as you've been talking to chief administrators, because this isn't just a theoretical conversation, this is a today thing that people are trying to figure out how to deal with and process. So what are some of the key drivers for these decision makers when they're trying to figure out how to deal with a long-term work relationship that's going to include some aspects of hybrid?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, they're looking at citizen engagement and how they are ensuring that all of those functions for the citizens and the customers remain effective, remain timely, and remain in the best fashion possible. But then within that context, they're looking to see, can we do that differently? What are some of the questions that we need to set up as we're talking about that citizen-facing engagement, opening up the DMVs again, opening up all the health and human services activities, human capital, HR. How do we do that again from this either remote or hybrid environment? So some of the questions that the chiefs are really looking at now are, again, how do we look at our state-owned real estate? How do we look at our lease spaces? How do we look at perhaps co-locating some of our agencies together, who works well together, and just looking across that state landscape more enterprise-wide to see how some of those shifts can occur. Again, ultimately knowing that this is an economic driver and that this is all around customer service.
Well, you started to talk about the real estate impact. I know that in Texas, there had been talk pre-pandemic about taking one of the largest agencies and changing up some of the way that staffing and traditional concepts of use of space were being considered. And I know that was controversial, but maybe because new is always controversial till people figure out what it means. And I think that that's maybe it was a harbinger of where we are today. Have you guys had a chance to put any actual levels associated with what telework adoption means for real estate? What's the actual impact of adopting a strategy like that?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, change is hard. It's never easy. I think you have to bring into that conversation the perception of trust around state government. There's always been this hesitancy or question around state government employees. And then when they went overnight, I think there was even a heightened question about, can they perform their jobs? Can they do what they're supposed to? Can I still access the services as a citizen and as a customer that I need? But again, states are doing that, and they're finding that that can be very, very effective and efficient. But that does come down to the nuts and bolts of real estate. Again, looking at pure square footage. How do we reduce the portfolio? How do we reduce the footprint? How do we co-locate? How do we ensure that we're bringing our buildings together in the most effective and efficient way? I'll just give you one quick example. I was doing a state visit with our chief administrator and his team out in Arizona here just a couple of weeks ago. And when I went in to visit, the office was bare. There was no one in the cubicles. There were no one in the office. There were boxes everywhere. What they found was when they co-located and when they went to a hybrid model and went to a hoteling or a space reservation system, what they could do was significantly reduce their space. I think they're reducing it about 50%. And so they were actually all moving down a couple of floors, all coming together. HR perhaps, and I'm giving just a pure example here, but HR was going to come in on perhaps Tuesdays and Thursdays, and some of the other functions were coming in on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So they were using the same space. They were able to do reduced space, reduced footprint, but still no change in services, no impact to the customer whatsoever.
Interesting. That's the real estate at the large level, and then people at a large level. What was interesting about that one Texas project I mentioned was introducing the concept of hoteling. A year and a half ago, we did a project as a sub to one of the big four. And when we came to their space to be able to do some planning, their whole space was set up in hoteling. So you had to say which rooms that you were intending to use. You could make choices on it. You could come in and out. Different, but very interesting. So I'm sure that there's some culture shock to that kind of change. There's positives to it too. So how are people actually thinking about how they implement the hoteling in a way that takes into account people and the fact that that may be different than what they've done before?
Absolutely. And that's something that each state agency and department really has to take a really close look at. Culture is critical to any workplace and workspace. So looking at how to ensure the culture, how to ensure that we can still meet and exceed agency goals and objectives, what functions are happening in that space, what are the expectations of the workforce, size, location, technology. There's just a lot of questions that come to play. One of the things that we're hearing from our chief administrators is that as they're looking at these different options, again, whether it be a pure remote workplace or a hybrid, or even coming back significantly to the office almost full time, a lot of things that they're having to deal with and question. What are our space needs? How can we ensure again that culture isn't lost? How and where do people work? Can we group people together by job function? How about the security requirements? Are there things that we need to be considerate of around not only the technology, but the data sensitivity? When we're looking at our managers and our supervisors, how do we measure productivity? What does that outcome-based model look like? Most of our managers were not trained are given the skills and competencies that they need to manage a remote or a hybrid workforce. So that's really a shift in mindset. A lot of human capital now is being changed as far as policies. Telework policies obviously have to be reviewed and looked at. Just the procedures as far as accountability, evaluating employees. Really, what does that look like? No longer is it how many hours we sit in a seat in front of a laptop or a computer, but actually, can we get our work done? And again, are we ensuring that that system of functionality is still there for our customers? So really, it's just a whole new look at our workforce and then the workplace. We're actually getting ready to release a video podcast later on this week where we took a real strong look at Michigan's Department of Technology Management and Budget. We actually walked through their space. They're retrofitting really everything that they're doing there. They talked to us a little bit about how they're changing the cubes for more space for those that are just coming in a day or two a week versus those who are more essential and have to be in the office nearly full time, that their space is a little bit, looking a little bit differently. They put a whole lot more emphasis on collaborative space, making sure that those conference rooms are open and airy and have the ability for social distancing if employees request that. A lot more on the lounge areas too, just how you can come together, because no longer are those water cooler conversations happening because we're not back in the office together. So they're creating more of that lounge space with little mini coffee bars where they can come together and just chat, get to know each other, and create that sense of culture and team.
That's great. So tell me about the report. What kind of advice or recommendations does it make as far as implementing some of these concepts, and let people know how they can get a hold of it if they want to learn more?
Yeah, great. Well, again, we're super excited to release this next Tuesday on July the 13th in collaboration between NASCA and JLL. It's based on 23 state interviews that we did with our chief administrators, and it's a twofold report, if you will. So we've got a report itself, a written long form report, along with an executive summary that folks can just grab and kind of take some of those quick nuggets. We also did 4 podcasts similar to what you and I are doing here, lessons learned from the states. And we took states that were at different stages in their portfolio redesign. So that's going to be really interesting. All that's going to be available at NASCA.org. And they're more than happy. They're all public documents to go to our Knowledge Center and pull that out. But 10 things that we have really shared with the states that we think are critical to transform their real estate portfolio. So I'll quickly just run through those as high-level overview topics to consider. The first is to really develop that business case, really to whet the appetite, if you will, to achieve that executive support. So support not only from the top down, but also bottom up to ensure that everyone is part of that conversation. Also convene, facilitate, and coordinate that enterprise-wide transformation. So again, looking across the agencies, again, so we can learn how to co-locate, bring folks together. The third, look at a workforce pilot and a workplace pilot to really determine the effectiveness of this flexible workspace. Once we see how successful this can be, a lot of our other agencies across the enterprise are willing to take that on. Looking at desk sharing and hoteling, we talked about that, increasing the collaboration space, real-time technology. This is critical. Understanding, again, both in-office data needs, at home and remote office data needs, those all having to come together and how we support that remote and hybrid collaboration. Co-locating agencies that I had mentioned earlier, almost this one-stop shop for the constituents, highly effective, and our states are seeing how important that is. Shedding some lease space and really consolidating into an owned space. Some of our larger metropolitan cities are seeing that they need to take a look at their own versus leased. And so that's definitely a consideration. Modernize your portfolio, very important during this redesign. And the last two, look at ways to monetize surplus properties. That really helps to maximize your real estate value. And then finally, really reinvest those savings from the portfolio into flexible workspaces. So again, I'll just lean on Michigan to say, take a look at the work that they're doing there, as are many of our states around the country, just really retrofitting, bringing together, finding ways to reinvest and re-energize, if you will, some of those savings from the portfolio.
Sounds like a thorough review and one that is timely and sorely needed. So it's great that you guys found the capacity and the time to get that work done. And I'm sure there's lots of people who want to take a look at that. So that's at NASCA.org, and that's freely available.
It is a public available document. Yes, we'd love for anyone to come take a look.
That's great. Well, that's very kind of you guys to contribute that out into the public domain. So Pam Goins, thank you for making time today. We will be running this right before your report comes out. So hopefully it gets a couple of eyeballs on it for you. And we appreciate your time. Hi, it's Dustin Lanier. Thanks for listening. Please find me on LinkedIn for original public sector operations content every week. And please reach out to me if I and my team of procurement professionals at Civic Initiatives can help you be a public procurement change agent.